The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the palace as Marcus Chen adjusted his ceremonial uniform for what felt like the 1000th time. The gold buttons gleamed against the deep blue fabric, each thread perfectly aligned according to royal protocol. At 28 years old, he had served as a member of the Queen's Royal Guard for 6 years, standing motionless for hours while dignitaries passed by, protecting the crown with unwavering dedication. But beneath the polished exterior and stoic expression lay a secret that would have shocked even his closest colleagues. Marcus had grown up in the very orphanage he now secretly supported. The Sunshine Children's Home sat in the forgotten corner of the city, where broken streetlights flickered and hope seemed as scarce as clean water. He remembered the cold mornings when 50 children would huddle together for warmth, sharing thin blankets and thinner soup. The memory of empty stomachs and worn-out shoes never left him, even as he now walked the pristine halls of power. The transformation from orphaned child to royal protector hadn't been easy. Marcus excelled in school despite the odds, earning a scholarship that changed his life's trajectory. His exceptional physical fitness and unwavering moral compass caught the attention of military recruiters, leading him through rigorous training programs that eventually landed him at the palace gates. Every step of his journey was fueled by a promise he made to himself as a frightened 8-year-old boy. He would return to help others escape the cycle of poverty and abandonment. That promise became reality 3 years ago when Marcus began his secret mission. Using nearly his entire salary, he started sending anonymous donations to the orphanage. The children had no idea that their mysterious benefactor was the same boy who once slept in bed number 37 dreaming of a better future. The staff attributed the regular gifts to a wealthy philanthropist who preferred to remain unnamed, never suspecting that their guardian angel wore a royal uniform and stood guard over the nation's most powerful family. Marcus lived in a tiny apartment above a bakery, choosing the cramped quarters over the comfortable housing provided to royal guards. Every penny saved went directly to the children. He walked to work instead of taking public transport, bought his clothes from thrift stores, and survived on simple meals of rice and vegetables. His colleagues often joked about his frugal lifestyle, assuming he was saving for a house or planning an expensive vacation. They had no idea that their reserve teammate was quietly changing 50 young lives. The orphanage director, Mrs. Sarah Williams, had worked at Sunshine Children's Home for over 20 years. She had watched countless children come and go, some finding loving families while others aged out of the system with nowhere to turn. The mysterious donations that began arriving 3 years ago felt like a miracle during her darkest period. The government funding had been cut, local donations were drying up, and she faced the heartbreaking possibility of closing the facility that served as home to so many vulnerable children. The first envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, containing enough cash to cover a month's worth of groceries. Mrs. Williams stared at the money with tears in her eyes, unable to comprehend such generosity from a stranger. There was no return address, no name, just a simple note that read, "For the children who need hope." Week after week, the donations continued arriving, each envelope containing exactly what the orphanage needed most at that moment. Sometimes it was money for new shoes when winter approached. Other times it covered medical expenses for sick children or funded educational supplies for the makeshift classroom. The mysterious donors seemed to understand the daily struggles of running an underfunded orphanage with supernatural precision. Mrs. Williams began to suspect that their benefactor had personal experience with their situation, but she could never have imagined the truth. Marcus developed an elaborate system to maintain his anonymity while ensuring the children received everything they needed. He would drive to different post offices across the city, mailing donations from various locations to avoid detection. During his rare days off, he would disguise himself and observe the orphanage from a distance, watching the children play in the small courtyard and noting what improvements were needed. He memorized their schedules, their faces, and their dreams, just as someone had once failed to do for him. The children at Sunshine Children's Home began to flourish under the mysterious support. 8-year-old Emma, who had been withdrawn and silent since arriving at the orphanage, started participating in art classes funded by the anonymous donations. 12-year-old David discovered his love for reading thanks to the new library books that appeared every month. The teenagers received vocational training opportunities that opened doors to real careers, breaking the cycle of poverty that had trapped so many before them. Marcus watched from the shadows as his childhood home transformed from a place of mere survival into a nurturing, with an environment where children could actually dream of better futures. The walls received fresh paint, the playground got new equipment, and most importantly, the children received individual attention from additional staff members hired with the mysterious funds. Each improvement felt like healing an old wound in Marcus's heart, replacing painful memories with hope. That the secrecy took its toll on Marcus's personal relationships. His fellow guards noticed his reluctance to join them for expensive dinners or weekend trips, but they respected his privacy. He dated occasionally but found it difficult to explain his lifestyle choices without revealing his mission. How could he tell someone that he chose to live like a monk while earning a decent salary, all to support children who didn't even know his name? Late at night, Marcus would lie awake in his small apartment, listening to the sounds of the city beyond his thin walls. Sometimes doubt crept in, making him wonder if one person's sacrifice could truly make a difference in the lives of 50 children. Then he would remember the statistics he had researched obsessively. Children who aged out of the foster system faced significantly higher rates of homelessness, unemployment, and incarceration. His contributions weren't just providing immediate relief. They were changing the entire trajectory of 50 young lives. The weight of his secret grew heavier with each passing month. Marcus began to realize that his mission was about more than money. These children needed to know that someone believed in them, that their lives had value beyond what society suggested. They needed role models and mentors, not just anonymous support. The boy who had once felt invisible and forgotten understood that visibility and recognition could be just as powerful as financial assistance. That Marcus stood at his post during another lengthy royal ceremony, watching diplomats and celebrities pass by in their expensive clothes and jewelry. He felt the familiar tug of two worlds. In one world, he protected the privileged and powerful, ensuring their safety and comfort. In the other world, he fought a different kind of battle against poverty. The morning Marcus chose to reveal his secret dawned gray and overcast, matching the nervous energy that had kept him awake most of the night. He arrived at the orphanage earlier than usual, hoping to speak with Mrs. Williams privately before the children began their weekend activities. His hands trembled slightly as he knocked on her office door. Carrying a folder containing documentation of every donation he had made over the past 3 years, Mrs. Williams looked up from her desk with surprise and pleasure at seeing her most reliable volunteer so early. Her office was cramped but organized, filled with filing cabinets containing the life stories of hundreds of children who had passed through these doors over the decades. Photos of successful graduates lined one wall, serving as inspiration during the difficult days when funding was tight and hope seemed scarce. Marcus took a deep breath and placed the folder on her desk, his voice barely steady as he began to explain. He watched her expression change from confusion to disbelief to amazement as he revealed that he was both their mysterious benefactor and a former resident of this very orphanage. The documentation he provided proved every detail of his story, showing bank transfers, postal receipts, and careful records of how each donation had been calculated based on the orphanage's specific needs. Mrs. Williams sat in stunned silence for several minutes, processing the revelation that their guardian angel had been sitting across from her desk every weekend for the past 2 months. Tears began flowing down her cheeks as she realized that the quiet, serious young man who had been helping with homework and organizing games was the same person whose generosity had quite literally saved their institution from closure. Conversation that followed lasted nearly 2 hours. Marcus shared the painful memories of his childhood at the orphanage, describing the cold winter nights when heating was inadequate and the constant uncertainty about whether there would be enough food for everyone. He explained how those experiences had motivated his academic success and military service. Driven by a determination to never feel helpless again, Mrs. Williams listened with a mixture of pride and heartbreak, recognizing in his story the struggles she had witnessed in countless children over the years. She admitted that she had always suspected their mysterious donor had personal experience with their situation, given the uncanny accuracy of the donations in addressing their most pressing needs, but she had never imagined the benefactor was someone who had slept in their dormitories and eaten meals at their tables together. They discussed the best approach for revealing Marcus's identity to the children. They agreed that honesty was essential, but delivery would be crucial. The children needed to understand that their support wasn't ending, but rather evolving into something more personal and sustainable. They also needed to process the reality that someone from their exact circumstances had achieved remarkable success without losing his connection to where he came from. Mrs. Williams suggested that Marcus share his story during their regular weekend gathering, when all the children came together for group activities. She believed that hearing his journey as a complete narrative would help them understand the connection between his past struggles and his current commitment to their welfare. More importantly, it would provide them with a real-life example of how determination and education could transform their circumstances. That afternoon, as 50 children gathered in the main common room, Marcus felt the weight of their attention in a completely different way than he had during his months as an anonymous volunteer. These children trusted him as someone who cared about their daily lives and listened to their concerns. Now he was about to reveal that his investment in their welfare was far deeper and more personal than they had imagined. He began by acknowledging how difficult it could be to believe in a positive future when your present circumstances felt overwhelming. He spoke about the universal human need for hope and the importance of having examples of people who had overcome similar challenges. The children listened with a focused attention they reserved for stories that might contain wisdom relevant to their own lives. Then Marcus revealed his secret, explaining that he had lived in this very building as a child, sleeping in the same dormitories and facing the same uncertainties about his future. The reaction was immediate and intense. Some children gasped in surprise, while others leaned forward with new interest. The teenagers, who had begun to see him as a mentor, suddenly understood why he seemed to comprehend their struggles with such accuracy and empathy. 8-year-old Emma raised her hand and asked if he had been scared when he lived there. Marcus smiled and admitted that he had been terrified much of the time, uncertain about whether anyone would ever want to adopt him and worried about what would happen when he became too old for the orphanage. His honesty about these childhood fears created an immediate bond with the younger children, who recognized their own anxieties in his words. 12-year-old David wanted to know how Marcus had become successful despite starting from their situation. This question allowed Marcus to emphasize the importance of education, explaining how he had studied obsessively because he understood that knowledge was his only path to a different life. He shared stories about doing homework by flashlight when the electricity was unreliable, and walking to the library every day after school because books opened doors to possibilities he couldn't imagine otherwise. The older teenagers were most interested in the practical aspects of his transformation. 16-year-old Michael asked about the transition from orphanage to independent living, while 15-year-old Sarah wanted to know how he had afforded college. Marcus answered these questions with specific details about scholarships, work-study programs, and the mentors who had guided him through the complex process of building a career. As the conversation continued, Marcus noticed a shift in the children's demeanor. They began sitting straighter, asking more ambitious questions about their own possibilities, and making connections between his story and their own dreams. The revelation that their benefactor was one of them had transformed an inspiring story into a personal roadmap they could potentially follow. But Marcus also made sure to address the challenges and setbacks he had faced along the way. He spoke about moments of doubt when he questioned whether someone from his background could truly succeed in environments designed for people with more advantages. He described the loneliness of being the only person in many situations who understood what it felt like to go without basic necessities, or to face the world without family support. Mrs. Williams watched this exchange with amazement, seeing her children engage with possibilities for their futures in ways she hadn't witnessed before. The abstract concept of success had suddenly become concrete and achievable, represented by someone who had shared their exact starting point. Marcus wasn't just telling them that transformation was possible, he was living proof that it had already happened. The session concluded with Marcus making a promise that resonated through the room like a solemn vow. He committed to continue his financial support, but more importantly, he pledged to serve as a mentor and advocate for each of them individually. He would help them navigate college applications, job interviews, and all the challenges that came with transitioning from institutional care to independent living. That evening, as the children prepared for bed, the atmosphere in the orphanage felt different. Conversations continued long into the night. The decision to reveal himself consumed Marcus's thoughts for weeks. He understood the risks involved in breaking his carefully maintained anonymity. The Royal Guard Service had strict policies about outside activities and charitable work that could potentially compromise their duties or create conflicts of interest. More importantly, he worried about how the revelation might affect the children and the stability of the support they had come to depend upon. Marcus began planning his approach with the same methodical precision he applied to his security duties. He couldn't simply appear at the orphanage door and announce himself as their mysterious benefactor. The shock might overwhelm the children, and Mrs. Williams might feel deceived by years of secrecy. Instead, he decided to gradually introduce himself as a volunteer, slowly building relationships before revealing the full truth. The opportunity came when Mrs. Williams posted a notice at the local community center seeking volunteers for weekend activities at the orphanage. Marcus saw the flyer during one of his morning jogs and felt his heart race with anticipation. This was the perfect way to enter their world legitimately, without raising suspicions about his true identity or intentions. That Saturday morning, Marcus arrived at Sunshine Children's home wearing civilian clothes and carrying a nervousness he hadn't felt since his first day of guard duty. The building looked different from the inside than it had during his distant observations. The walls showed signs of the improvements his donations had funded: fresh paint in cheerful colors, educational posters purchased with his money, and new furniture that replaced the broken pieces he remembered from his own childhood. Mrs. Williams greeted him warmly, her weathered face lighting up with genuine appreciation for his willingness to volunteer. She was a small woman in her late 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that held both kindness and exhaustion from decades of caring for forgotten children. Marcus felt a surge of respect for this woman who had dedicated her life to providing stability in an inherently unstable situation. The children were initially shy around the new volunteer, clustering together and whispering among themselves. As they tried to determine whether this tall, serious-looking man was friend or threat, Marcus understood their caution. These children had learned not to trust too quickly or too completely. Many had been disappointed by adults who made promises they couldn't keep or who disappeared without explanation. 8-year-old Emma was the first to approach him, the same girl he had watched from afar, who had emerged from her shell thanks to art supplies he had provided, walked up with a drawing clutched in her small hands. The picture showed a house with a big garden and a family of stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. When she asked if he liked her drawing, Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Throughout that first day, Marcus observed how his anonymous support had transformed the daily life of the orphanage. The children were better dressed, healthier looking, and more engaged in activities than he remembered from his own time there. The older teenagers spoke enthusiastically about vocational training programs that were opening doors to real career opportunities. The younger children showed off books and toys that stimulated their imagination and learning. But Marcus also noticed what money couldn't buy. Despite the material improvements, many children still carried the emotional scars of abandonment and uncertainty. 12-year-old David, the boy who had discovered reading through donated books, asked Marcus if he thought anyone would ever want to adopt an older kid like him. 15-year-old Sarah worried constantly about what would happen when she aged out of the system in a few years. These conversations reinforced Marcus's growing conviction that his mission needed to evolve beyond financial support. These children needed mentors, role models, and most importantly, hope that their circumstances could change. They needed to see living proof that someone from their exact situation could build a successful, meaningful life. Over the following weeks, Marcus became a regular weekend volunteer. He helped with homework, organized sports activities, and listened to the children's dreams and fears. Each interaction strengthened his bond with the kids, while also deepening his understanding of their individual needs and personalities. The teenagers began to see him as a trusted adult they could confide in, while the younger children started following him around like a beloved older brother. Mrs. Williams began to rely on Marcus's consistent presence and practical help. She confided in him about the ongoing financial challenges of running the orphanage, praising their mysterious donor while worrying about the sustainability of such generosity. Marcus listened to her concerns with a mixture of pride and anxiety, knowing that his secret was becoming harder to maintain with each passing day. The tipping point came during a conversation with 16-year-old Michael, the oldest resident of the orphanage. Michael had been there for 8 years, arriving as a frightened child and growing into a thoughtful young man who looked out for the younger kids. He was struggling with college applications, uncertain whether his dreams of becoming a social worker were realistic given his financial circumstances. As they sat together in the orphanage's small library, surrounded by books that Marcus's donations had purchased, Michael asked him a question that stopped his heart. The teenager wanted to know if Marcus thought it was possible for someone from their background to make a real difference in the world. He wondered if people like them were destined to remain on society's margins, always struggling to survive rather than truly thriving. Marcus looked into Michael's earnest face and saw his own 16-year-old self, full of doubt and desperate for someone to believe in his potential. In that moment he realized that withholding his story was actually a disservice to these children. His journey from orphan to royal guard wasn't just personal achievement. It was proof that their dreams weren't foolish fantasies. That night, Marcus made his final decision. The time for anonymous support had passed. These children deserved to know that one of their own had not only escaped their circumstances but had chosen to return and lift others up. They needed to understand that success didn't mean forgetting where you came from, but rather using your position to create opportunities for those still climbing the same mountain you had conquered. Marcus spent the next few days crafting a plan for his revelation. He would tell Mrs. Williams first, explaining his history and his mission. Then, with her support, he would share his story with the children in a way that inspired rather than overwhelmed them. He would emphasize not just his current position, but the struggles and setbacks he had overcome along the way. The Royal Guard uniform hanging in his closet seemed to watch him as he prepared for this life-changing conversation. That uniform represented years of discipline, sacrifice, and achievement, but it also represented the platform that had enabled him to help others. Soon it would become a symbol of hope for 50 children who needed to believe that their current circumstances were not their permanent destiny. Marcus understood that revealing his identity would complicate his life in countless ways. His fellow guards might view him differently, his superiors might question his judgment, and the children might struggle with the sudden transformation of their anonymous benefactor into a real person, with his own vulnerabilities and limitations. But he also understood that some risks were worth taking when the potential reward was changing lives forever. As he prepared for sleep that night, Marcus felt a peace he hadn't experienced since beginning his secret mission 3 years earlier. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of stepping out of the shadows and into the light of authentic relationship with the children he had been quietly supporting. Tomorrow, 50 young lives would discover that miracles sometimes came disguised as ordinary people with extraordinary commitment to making a difference. The weeks following Marcus's revelation brought profound changes to life at Sunshine Children's Home. The children approached their daily activities with renewed energy and purpose, their conversations peppered with references to college plans and career aspirations that had seemed impossible just months earlier. Marcus noticed that homework time had become more focused, with older children helping younger ones while discussing their own educational goals with newfound seriousness. But the transformation wasn't without challenges. Some children struggled to process the reality that their mysterious benefactor had been hiding in plain sight during his volunteer work. 10-year-old James expressed feeling confused and slightly betrayed, wondering why Marcus hadn't trusted them with the truth from the beginning. These conversations required careful handling, as Marcus explained the difference between secrecy meant to protect versus secrecy meant to deceive. Marcus began spending even more time at the orphanage, balancing his demanding schedule as a royal guard with his commitment to mentoring the children individually. He developed a systematic approach to supporting their educational and career development, creating personalized plans for each child based on their interests, abilities, and aspirations. The teenagers received the most intensive guidance as they faced immediate decisions about their post-orphanage futures. 16-year-old Michael became one of Marcus's most dedicated men, spending hours discussing college applications and career paths in social work. Marcus helped him understand the financial aid system, review scholarship applications, and prepare for interviews. More importantly, he shared his own experiences navigating higher education as a first-generation college student without family support or financial resources. The transformation in Michael was remarkable. The uncertain teenager who had questioned whether someone from their background could make a real difference was now confidently pursuing admission to the university's social work program. His essays about growing up in foster care and his commitment to helping other vulnerable children were compelling testimonies to his personal growth and clear sense of purpose. 15-year Sarah presented different challenges and opportunities. She had developed a passion for business and entrepreneurship, inspired by Marcus's stories about financial planning and strategic thinking. However, her dreams of starting her own company seemed impossibly ambitious given her circumstances. Marcus worked with her to break down her long-term vision into achievable steps, helping her understand that entrepreneurial success required the same kind of gradual progress that had characterized his own journey. The younger children also began showing signs of transformation. 8-year-old Emma, who had initially approached Marcus with her colorful drawings, started expressing interest in becoming an artist or art teacher. Marcus arranged for her to receive more advanced art supplies and connected her with local artists who volunteered their time for informal lessons. Her confidence grew visibly as her artistic skills developed and adults began taking her creative aspirations seriously. Mrs. Williams watched these developments with a mixture of joy and concern. She was thrilled to see the children embracing ambitious goals and working harder toward their achievement. However, she worried about the sustainability of Marcus's intensive involvement and the potential impact on the children if his circumstances changed. During one of their regular planning meetings, she gently raised these concerns. Marcus acknowledged the validity of her worries while explaining his long-term vision for sustainable support. He had been developing relationships with his colleagues in the Royal Guard and other professional contacts who might serve as additional mentors and resources for the children. His goal was to create a network of support that didn't depend entirely on his personal availability and resources. This networking effort led to an unexpected development in Marcus's professional life. His commanding officer, Colonel Patricia Hayes, noticed changes in his demeanor and performance that indicated increased focus and purposefulness. During their quarterly evaluation meeting, she asked about the source of his obvious personal growth and professional maturity. Marcus faced another moment of decision about disclosure. Royal Guards were expected to maintain certain standards of conduct and avoid activities that might compromise their effectiveness or create conflicts of interest. His charitable work and mentoring activities weren't prohibited, but they represented a significant commitment that could potentially interfere with his duties if not managed carefully. After considerable internal debate, Marcus decided to share his story with Colonel Hayes. He explained his background, his connection to the orphanage, and his commitment to supporting the children's development. He emphasized his dedication to maintaining the highest standards of professional performance while also fulfilling his personal mission to help vulnerable youth. Colonel Hayes listened to his account with growing admiration and interest. Rather than expressing concern about potential conflicts of interest, she revealed that the Royal Guard service had been looking for ways to demonstrate their commitment to community service and social responsibility. Marcus's work with the orphanage could serve as a model for other guards who wanted to contribute to charitable causes in their spare time. This conversation led to an official partnership between the Royal Guard service and Sunshine Children's Home. The partnership provided additional resources and volunteers, while also giving Marcus's work institutional support and recognition. Several of his colleagues expressed interest in participating in mentoring activities, expanding the network of adult support available to the children. The partnership also brought unexpected media attention to both Marcus's story and the orphanage's work. A local newspaper reporter learned about the Royal Guard's charitable activities and requested an interview. Marcus initially hesitated, concerned about publicity that might compromise his effectiveness as a security professional or create unrealistic expectations for the children. However, Mrs. Williams convinced him that sharing their story publicly could benefit other children and inspire additional support for orphanages throughout the region. The resulting newspaper article, titled From Orphan to Royal Guard, A Story of Hope and Giving Back, generated overwhelming positive response from readers. The publicity brought both opportunities and complications. Donations began flowing in from readers inspired by Marcus's story, providing the orphanage with additional resources for programs and improvements. Local businesses offered internships and job training opportunities for the older teenagers. Community members volunteered their time and skills to support various activities and educational programs. But the attention also brought scrutiny and pressure that Marcus hadn't anticipated. Some critics questioned whether his story was too good to be true, while others suggested that his success was exceptional and shouldn't be used to judge other children's potential. Marcus found himself in the unfamiliar position of defending not just his own achievements, but the capabilities and worth of all children in similar circumstances. The children themselves had mixed reactions to their newfound visibility. Some enjoyed the positive attention and the sense that their lives mattered to people beyond their immediate community. Others felt uncomfortable with strangers knowing intimate details about their circumstances and backgrounds. Marcus worked carefully with each child to help them process these experiences and maintain their sense of privacy and dignity. Through all these changes, Marcus remained focused on his core mission, providing the individual attention and support that each child needed to reach their potential. The expanded resources and increased visibility were valuable tools, but they couldn't replace the personal relationships and one-on-one mentoring that formed the foundation of his work. As the first school year since his revelation came to an end, Marcus reflected on how dramatically life had changed for everyone involved. The children were achieving academic success at higher rates, pursuing more ambitious goals, and demonstrating. 2 years after revealing his identity, Marcus stood in the audience of the city's largest university auditorium, watching 16-year-old Michael walk across the stage to receive his high school diploma. The young man who had once questioned whether someone from their background could make a meaningful difference was now headed to college, on a full scholarship, determined to become a social worker specializing in foster care reform. The graduation ceremony represented a milestone not just for Michael, but for the entire transformation that had taken place at Sunshine Children's Home. Of the 12 teenagers who had been at the orphanage when Marcus first revealed his story, 10 were now pursuing higher education or vocational training. The remaining 2 had chosen military service. Inspired by Marcus's own path to success through disciplined service. Sarah, now 17, had started a small business making and selling handcrafted jewelry, with profits funding a college savings account that grew steadily each month. Her entrepreneurial venture had begun as a school project, but Marcus's guidance in business planning and financial management had helped her transform it into a legitimate enterprise. She employed 2 other teenagers from the orphanage, creating a mini ecosystem of economic opportunity within their small community. Emma, now 10 years old, had become something of a local celebrity for her artistic talent. Her paintings were displayed in the orphanage's main hallway, and a local gallery had featured several of her works in a community art show. More importantly, her confidence had blossomed under the nurturing attention of Marcus and the volunteer art teachers he had recruited. She spoke confidently about her plans to attend art school and eventually become an art therapist, working with children. The success stories were inspiring, but Marcus had learned that transformation was neither linear nor universal. Some children struggled with the increased expectations and attention that came with the orphanage's improved reputation. Others found it difficult to believe in their own potential despite the evidence of their peers' achievements. Marcus discovered that his role as mentor required not just encouragement, but also patience with setbacks and realistic acknowledgement of individual challenges. 9-year-old Tommy presented one such challenge. He had arrived at the orphanage just 6 months earlier, deeply traumatized by experiences in previous foster homes where he had suffered neglect and emotional abuse. Despite the supportive environment and additional resources now available, Tommy struggled with behavioral issues and academic performance that reflected his past trauma rather than his intellectual capacity. Marcus worked closely with Mrs. Williams and the orphanage's newly hired counselor to develop a specialized approach for Tommy and other children dealing with significant trauma histories. They learned that success couldn't be measured solely by academic achievement or career advancement. Sometimes the victory was simply helping a child feel safe enough to sleep through the night or trust an adult enough to ask for help. These experiences taught Marcus valuable lessons about the complexity of child welfare and the limitations of individual intervention. No matter how well-intentioned, he began advocating for systemic changes in the foster care system, using his public platform and professional connections to highlight the need for better training, increased funding, and more comprehensive support for vulnerable children. His advocacy work brought him to the attention of policymakers and child welfare organizations throughout the region. Marcus found himself testifying before legislative committees, consulting with social service agencies, and speaking at conferences about the importance of supporting children aging out of foster care. His unique perspective as someone who had experienced the system from within gave his recommendations credibility and emotional impact that resonated with audiences. The Royal Guard Service initially expressed some concern about Marcus's increasing public profile and political advocacy. However, Colonel Hayes ultimately supported his work, recognizing that his efforts reflected positively on the organization's commitment to community service. The service even adjusted his schedule to accommodate speaking engagements and legislative hearings, treating his advocacy as an extension of his professional duties to protect and serve the community. Expanding influence also created new opportunities for the children at Sunshine Children's Home. His speaking engagements often included appearances by current and former residents who shared their own stories and perspectives. Michael became a powerful advocate for educational support programs, while Sarah spoke about the importance of entrepreneurship opportunities for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. These speaking opportunities provided the children with experiences far beyond what they could have imagined during their early days at the orphanage. They met business leaders, politicians, and community activists who became additional mentors and supporters. More importantly, they learned to see themselves as voices for change rather than simply recipients of charity. The transformation extended beyond individual success stories to encompass the entire culture and operation of the orphanage. Mrs. Williams, energized by the positive changes and additional resources, had expanded their programs to include college preparation courses, vocational training partnerships with local businesses, and mental health services for children dealing with trauma. The facility that had once struggled to provide basic necessities was now recognized as a model program for comprehensive child development. However, success brought new challenges and responsibilities that Marcus hadn't fully anticipated. The orphanage's improved reputation led to increased referrals from social services, meaning they were caring for more children with increasingly complex needs. The additional resources helped, but the demand sometimes outpaced their capacity to provide the individualized attention that had become their hallmark. Marcus also faced personal challenges as his dual life as royal guard and child advocate became increasingly demanding. The physical and emotional toll of maintaining excellence in both roles sometimes left him exhausted and stretched thin. He began experiencing periods of doubt about his ability to sustain such intensive involvement while maintaining his professional responsibilities and personal well-being. These concerns came to a head during a particularly difficult period when 3 new children arrived at the orphanage within the same week, each carrying severe trauma that required specialized care and attention. At the same time, Marcus was dealing with increased security demands at the palace due to an international diplomatic crisis that required extended shifts and heightened vigilance. The collision of these responsibilities forced Marcus to confront the limitations of his individual capacity and the need for more sustainable approaches to supporting the children's development. He realized that his original vision of single-handedly transforming 50 lives had evolved into something much larger and more complex than one person could manage effectively. This realization led to a period of reflection and strategic planning that would define the next phase of his mission. Marcus began working with Mrs. Williams, Colonel Hayes, and community partners to develop a more systematic and sustainable approach to supporting vulnerable youth. They established formal partnerships with local colleges, businesses, and social service organizations that could provide ongoing resources and opportunities beyond what any individual mentor could offer. The partnership model proved highly effective. One of the most significant developments during this period was the establishment of a scholarship fund specifically for children aging out of foster care. Marcus had contributed his own resources to create the initial endowment, but the fund quickly grew through donations from community members inspired by his story and the achievements of the children he had mentored. The scholarship program provided not just financial support for education, but also comprehensive mentoring and support services that addressed the unique challenges faced by young adults transitioning from institutional care to independence. Recipients received help with college applications, job placement, housing arrangements, and the countless practical skills needed for successful independent living. Marcus watched with pride as the first scholarship recipients began their college careers, knowing that their success would inspire and support future generations of children facing similar challenges. The program had created a self-sustaining cycle of achievement and giving back that would continue long after his direct involvement ended. By the end of his 4th year since revealing his identity, Marcus could see the broader impact of his decision to step out of the shadows and engage directly with the children he had been supporting. The ripple effects of his mentorship had spread throughout the community, creating new opportunities and changing attitudes about the potential of children in foster care. The media continued to follow the stories of the children from Sunshine Children's Home, documenting their achievements and challenges in ways that humanized the foster care system for broader audiences. These stories helped generate support for policy changes and increased funding for programs serving vulnerable youth throughout the region. Marcus had also inspired other professionals to engage in similar mentoring and advocacy work. Several of his colleagues in the Royal Guard had begun volunteering with youth organizations, while other successful individuals who had overcome difficult childhoods reached out to share their stories and resources with current foster children. The transformation that had begun with anonymous donations in unmarked envelopes had evolved into a comprehensive movement for supporting vulnerable youth and reforming systems that had failed them for generations. Marcus understood that his personal story was just one thread in a much larger tapestry of change and hope. As he prepared for the next phase of his mission, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him from frightened orphan to successful professional to community advocate. Each stage had required different skills and sacrifices, but all had been guided by the same fundamental commitment to ensuring that other children would have better opportunities than those available to him during his own childhood. The boy who had once felt invisible and forgotten had not only found his own voice but had amplified the voices of dozens of other young people who deserved to be heard and supported. His secret mission had become a public testament to the power of individual commitment combined with community support to transform lives and create lasting change. "5 years had passed since Marcus first revealed his identity to the children at Sunshine Children's Home, and the transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Standing in the renovated courtyard of the orphanage, now officially renamed the Sunshine Youth Development Center, Marcus watched as dozens of current and former residents gathered for their annual reunion celebration. The event had become a tradition that brought together success stories from across the years, creating a living testament to the power of hope, support, and determination. Michael, now 21, had graduated from university with honors and was beginning his master's degree in social work. His thesis research focused on innovative approaches to supporting youth aging out of foster care. Directly influenced by his own experiences and the programs that had transformed his life, he had already been accepted for a prestigious internship with the state's Department of Children and Family Services, where he planned to advocate for policy changes based on first-hand knowledge of what worked and what didn't. Sarah's small business had grown into a legitimate enterprise employing 6 people, including 3 other former foster children. Her handcrafted jewelry was now sold in boutiques across the region, and she had been featured in business magazines as an example of successful young entrepreneurship. More importantly, she had established a mentorship program for other young people interested in starting their own businesses, creating another pathway for economic independence and self-sufficiency. Emma, now 13, had received a full scholarship to attend a prestigious arts academy where she was developing her talents in both visual arts and art therapy techniques. Her dream of helping other children through creative expression was becoming reality even before she finished her education. Several of her paintings hung in the lobby of the youth center, serving as inspiration for current residents who might doubt their own creative potential. But the reunion also celebrated quieter victories that might not make headlines but were equally important. Tommy, the traumatized 9-year-old who had struggled with behavioral issues and academic performance, was now a confident 14-year-old who served as a peer mentor for newly arrived children. His transformation had required years of patient support, specialized counseling, and individualized approaches that honored his unique needs and timeline for healing. The reunion festivities included presentations by current residents who shared their goals and progress with the assembled crowd of supporters, mentors, and community partners. These presentations demonstrated the comprehensive approach to development that had evolved over the years, addressing not just educational and career preparation but also emotional healing, social skills, and civic engagement. Marcus listened to these presentations with deep satisfaction, knowing that each young person's journey represented countless hours of individual attention, systemic advocacy, and community investment. The model they had developed at Sunshine had been replicated in other facilities throughout the state, expanding the impact far beyond their original 50 children. The scholarship fund Marcus had established with his own resources had grown to over $2 million through community donations and corporate partnerships. It now supported not just college education but also vocational training, entrepreneurship programs, and specialized services for young adults with disabilities or mental health challenges. The fund's board of directors included several program graduates who brought invaluable perspective to decisions about resource allocation and program development. Colonel Hayes, who had retired from the Royal Guard the previous year, now served as executive director of the foundation that had grown around Marcus's original mission. Her leadership and organizational skills had been instrumental in scaling the programs while maintaining the personal touch and individualized attention that made them effective. Under her guidance, the foundation had secured government contracts and grants that ensured sustainable funding for decades to come. Marcus himself had been promoted within the Royal Guard service and now served as liaison between the service and various community organizations. This role allowed him to continue his advocacy work as part of his official duties while maintaining the professional excellence that had characterized his career from the beginning. He had also completed a master's degree in public administration, better equipping himself to navigate the policy and funding environments that determined opportunities for vulnerable youth. The ripple effects of the Sunshine model had spread internationally, with delegations from other countries visiting to study their approaches and adapt them to different cultural contexts. Marcus had traveled to speak at conferences in Europe, Asia, and South America, with sharing not just the practical strategies they had developed but also the underlying philosophy that every child deserved investment and support, regardless of their starting circumstances. These speaking engagements had led to the publication of Marcus's memoir, titled From Shadows to Service, A Royal Guard's Mission to Transform Lives. The book had become a bestseller, with proceeds funding additional scholarships and program expansion. More importantly, it had inspired thousands of readers to examine their own opportunities to mentor, advocate, and support vulnerable young people in their communities. The memoir had also brought Marcus's story to the attention of the royal family themselves. During a private ceremony at the palace, he had been personally commended by the Queen for his service both as a guard and as a community advocate. The recognition had validated his belief that true service involved protecting not just the powerful, but also the powerless, ensuring that society's most vulnerable members had opportunities for growth and success. However, perhaps the most meaningful recognition had come from the children themselves. During the reunion celebration, they presented Marcus with a handmade album containing letters, drawings, and photographs documenting how their lives had changed since meeting him. The album included updates from program graduates who were now teachers, social workers, business owners, military officers, and parents raising their own children with the confidence and skills they had developed.